Alright, let's do the last of the three of the blown ornaments. That would be the cobalt with gold and silver fume, wrap and rake, and mold blown. So here we go. We'll get the loop out of the way first. Just grab some color. This is slime. And we'll put some heat to it, let gravity and a little bit of pushing with a tool form it into a loop. And we'll clean that loop up and set it aside for when we're ready for it. Yeah, just bring it back and touch it to itself and then heat up that area pretty good. Back and forth. When you're rotating those, it helps to go back and forth instead of rotating it all in one direction. The more you go in one direction, the more it tends to want to spiral. Flame in there, clean that up a little bit, we'll get it nice and smooth and get the hole on the inside about the size that we want. And you can use other things, lattichinos, filigranos, things like that to make more interesting loops. Dichro is also nice in a loop. So we'll punty up to it. We want the punty to be strong enough to hold the weight of the entire piece in this case. So make sure that this is good. Good amount of surface area on the weld, but yet leaving that acute angle so that it will tap off when you want it to. Okay, and then we'll cut that off. And we'll leave a little bit of glass there that's in excess. You don't want a perfect donut shape. You want it to be almost like a Q or something with that little tail sticking down. That little extra bit of glass will help when it comes time to weld that up to the piece you're attaching it to. Okay, so let's get out a thing of cobalt. That's 1 inch diameter tubing. It's about 4.5 inches long. And this is a 4mm Boro rod in my left hand with just a little tiny drop of gold on the end. It's a very small thing, much smaller than a grain of rice even. And you don't want to have too much gold on there. If you use a very large piece, the gold is so dense and heavy, it will get molten and slide off, and you'll wind up with just a very expensive desk surface with a splatter of gold on it. A little tiny piece of gold will stay in place. So there we go, we've got gold fume on it. Let's go up to the bigger torch and we'll wrap on some clear. Put a little bit of heat back into that. It was really getting kind of cool. And we want it particularly hot because when we wrap this on, we need that clear to stick as well as possible. It's quite possible for the spirals that you've wrapped on to cool enough that they may shatter or break, and when you put the heat and the gas is flowing past it, it may tend to blow them off. So getting that nice and hot and then getting a good adhesion is really important. If you have to break it into sections, break it into sections and then melt it in a little bit and move on. It may be too much to try and do the entire thing, as is the case with this one here. I'm going to wrap up to the top but not down that slope. So I'm going to cut it off right there. And then go back and make sure that I've got that stuff staying on. Right here's the riskiest part, where you could be blowing up those cold ones you first put on. You can see, in fact, one of the small ones on the end did kind of buckle a little bit, but not much. I'll just add a little bit more right there and then heat that in. And then we'll go up and finish off the tip that we didn't do first. And in this way we don't lose what's coiled on already. There we go. So this is going to get raked with two different kinds of raking material. The first one is going to be 4mm. I'm going to put 4 equal stripes down it with 4mm. And that's really going to put everything into place and lock it down. And then I'm going to go on the spaces in between not with solid rod, but rather with tubing. In this case, it's about 12 mil standard wall, which means fairly thin wall. And I'll rake with that. And the reason for using that thin wall tubing is it covers a really wide path with a minimal amount of heat and with adding a minimal amount of glass to the overall piece. It comes with a very wide, flat footprint. You'll see that as it melts on. But again, first 4 rakes here. And most of the heat is going into the glass that's being raked on, not the tube below. If you put too much heat to the tube below, you'll begin distorting things and maybe even getting your clear rod too cold, and it'll begin pushing and breaking the little wraps. So you want it to just flow right over them. And when you get down that end right there, pull it backwards a little bit before pulling it off. By doing that, you remove that acute angle at the end and reduce the risk of it cracking right where all of that work ends and your 9.5 tubing begins. So now we're going to add a generous amount of silver fume. That's started out as a 2-ounce coin, and it's worked down to about an ounce now. If you're careful with it, you can heat it up. Silver's got good thermal conduction, so it'll do it smoothly and heat evenly. And you can heat just the smallest edge of it while holding it in the tweezers and fume off of that. If you get much below an ounce, though, it becomes difficult to use that technique. So this is the tubing. You can see that that's, well, you know, it's tubing. And it's going to cover a real wide area when it lays down there. So those 4 mil when laid down, I don't know, maybe they cover 4 or 5 millimeters width. But this tubing is going to cover that entire area in between the previous rakes in one pass. It takes a little bit to get the heat built in there at first, but once you get it moving, it'll smooth down, and the cool glass on the back side of the flame, what you're applying, tends to force down the material that's facing the flame and kind of paddles it smooth. You can see how wide and narrow that is. So a little bit more. Rock some heat up into that tube to preheat it so that it sets down easily. There we go. Paddle down that little tail end, again to prevent a crack from running around the handle area. Yes, I have had that happen, and a few of these at this stage just drop right off onto the ground or worse. Rock it a little bit in the flame, get the heat moved around, and then draw that off. There we go. You see how quickly that's coating the entire surface. And I hope I don't have to add, but I'm going to. The other end of that tube needs to be open. If you plug it with your hand, or you use an end that's been sealed, that air inside that tube is going to keep pressurizing and blowing bubbles as you're trying to apply it. So the tube has to be open on the end in order to rake with the tubing. Okay, we've got what we want for colors and patterns in there. So now I'm going to grab this rod here. I'm going to use it as a punty. Smooth out the direction on that. It was a little bit bent from applying the raking. Working down the tip first to get that smooth and the wall thickness even. And attach a very good punty. We're going to take care of the ends first. Those are the parts most likely to crack or break or have pieces pop off before you can get back to them. So we're going to smooth that down very quickly and only as much as needed, and then move that heat over to the other side. Don't just go to the other side, but gently move it over to the right side. And then I'm going to heat in just that narrow area where it slopes down to the 9.5 tubing. because I want that smooth and perfect before I move on to the next step of condensing up the material, preparing it for the main blowing. There we go, and marvering it down creates a very even wall thickness and a very smooth transition from handle to the item that we're making. So while I'm letting that set up just enough that I can handle it without it twisting out of shape on me, applying heat to the center, and now we're really going to get it going. Once it's condensed together, I'm going to drop it down to the marvering pad and apply a little bit of pressure, blowing on the tube, to push that wall out to rock against the marvering pad and smooth out the surface. So just a lot of heat here in the center. This is pretty fun. Just big old flame and cook it. There we go. And then we'll drop it down onto that paddle, pressurizing it a little bit, and it will conform to the paddle shape, becoming very smooth and even, which will be important when we go to apply that last heat before blowing this into the mold. If it's got any irregularities or asymmetries now, it'll be a problem later, so fix it before you move on. There you go, a little bit more marvering. That's pretty smooth. At this point I can take off that punty on the left, and then we'll apply a lot of heat to this thing and blow it into a mold. In this case the mold is it's some kind of a kitchen item. I think it had to do with cooking chicken. But by cutting off one end, it also had a circular opening on it, and putting all those arms together and then welding it up to a handle, it's made a very useful little hand tool. So a lot of heat. We've already condensed this up and we really haven't blown it out, so it's pretty thick. It's got a lot of heat into it, and that heat will hold a while. There's no big hurry to get this out of the glass and into the mold real fast. You can take your time. There we go. Turn that torch off and light up the little one. Place your gathering in there, and then while rotating to make sure that everything is still symmetrical and straight, there we go, blowing it out, and it's conforming to those wire walls. Then we'll go ahead and put a loop on top. I know this differs from the diagram I did for this piece, in that the fluted portion is on top and not the bottom. I just decided after seeing it that I wanted that to be the top. And one of the things about doing this kind of work is if you see something en route and you're like, wow, you know, I think it'd look better this way, you do have that freedom to do that, so do so. There we go. That's attached very well now. A smooth transition from the ornament to the loop. There we go. So now we'll go down to the bottom and begin heating up that transitional area between the ornament and the handle. And after condensing it down a bit and really getting it hot, I'll pull it out a little bit so that I can make it skinny. And I mentioned this in the earlier videos for the other ornaments. You don't want to have a sealed vessel and then put heat to it and have molten glass and then stop when it's sealed. It will suck that molten glass back inside. So I'm pulling out a much narrower neck and then letting it cool just long enough that when I go down and finally close up the very small remaining hole, that there's no tendency for it to suck inwards and create a weird shape or inside bubble. There we go. And then we can cut that off and it will not run back inside. That's it. Now we just need to tap off the punny. And we'll hold that in claws. Little tap and then clean up our punty mark. And that is finished. these do have beautiful colors in different lighting conditions, much like the silver fumed one before, but this one adds the gold and a few more layers and elements to it. They're very sparkly in the sun, make great window hangers well after the holiday seasons. We'll throw it in the kiln, anneal that for a little bit. Yeah, great colors. Love the effects you can get out of fuming, gold and silver and layers and cobalt. Just wonderful stuff. Anyway, thank you for watching. We'll be back with more soon, and if you like that, please like and subscribe. Thank you.